Now there's so many videos of people telling you how to practice, including myself, and giving you practice tips. But there comes a time when perhaps you've done too much practice, and when should I stop a practice session? And I feel like this question doesn't get asked enough about, so I'm going to answer it in today's video. When practicing, we often have this sort of bell curve perhaps. When you start, you're perhaps at your lowest, and you work your way up the curve until you get to a point where you've achieved whatever you wanted in your practice session. But there's a bit which doesn't get talked about, is it starts going down towards the end of the practice session, and not quite as far down. Let's say the beginning's there, you can end about there if you're really over practice, whereas you want to end up here. And essentially it comes with experience after all, and it depends on the situation and necessity and things like that, but you need to realize the point when you've got the thing, and you need to tell yourself in that moment, okay, this is when I need to stop. When you're on that musical high, that is when you want to stop. And let me tell you why. In the moment, you may feel like, oh no, I need to keep practicing this. I'm enjoying this so much. This is so good. You want to stop at that high after you've got it, maybe just a few times. You don't just have to get it after you've got it the first time. Maybe try it again, and perhaps if you fail it for the second time, just leave it there as well. But I would actually say a good thing, especially if you're new to this sort of when should I stop practicing and you're unaware of when you should stop practicing, and you haven't really given this much thought. As soon as you've achieved the thing which you've been wanting to do as a practice session, this is a great way to think about it, that is when you end your practice session. Once you've done the thing you set out to do, and you've just done it once, and you've done it for the first time, that is where you should end your practice session. Just end it right there. End it on that musical high. You've done the thing which you set out and achieved to do. The practice session has been successful. And while you can do it a couple of other times, that gives you a lot more risk for error, and that does demotivate us, especially once we've just had that high and we start coming down, and you'll gradually realize, I just keep making more mistakes, and then you get frustrated at yourself, and then you reach a point where you're just like, oh, I'm just going to give up. And the thing is, you don't want to reach that point. You want to stay at that high once you've just done it for the first time, especially if you're new to this. Once you've done the thing that you set out to do, then just end your practice session there. And you might say, well, what are the advantages of ending on a high apart from, you've achieved the thing for the practice session? Why can't I just keep working on it more? Surely it's just going to keep getting better. Well, I've partially explained why that isn't the case, as there's a lot more room for error, and often in cases, if it's a real challenge for you and it's been a challenge for you, you'll notice that it'll start to fall off as you sort of play it too much. You overplay it and you start making mistakes. And also, another reason why you don't want to do that is you may not think about this when you're playing and learning through things. When you are playing something and you're making mistakes, you are learning the mistakes, in air quotes, essentially. Your fingers are learning the mistakes. If you keep making those mistakes over and over and over again, and you just keep trying to hammer it out and get the right thing out, then that is a bad thing, because you're learning the mistakes. You're making it harder for yourself to not play the mistake if you keep playing the mistake over and over again. So that is when it's time to slow that thing down and stop making the mistakes. But if you end on a high once you've just got it right, you leave less room for you to even need to do mistake correction. There's essentially more work that needs to be done if you keep practicing that affects you negatively once you've reached that initial high. And the main reason I feel it is so important to end on that practice high is because it really makes you want to come back the next day and do the same thing, because consistency is key when it comes to music. Practice makes perfect, but if you're consistently practicing, no matter for how long each day, could be 5 minutes, could be 10 minutes, could be an hour, could be several hours, if you do that every single day and you're consistent with it, and you end your practice sessions on a high, you're always going to feel motivated to get back into the swing of things and just get playing music again. As when you end your practice sessions on a high, you're on that high, you feel so invigorated, so happy and excited about the music that you're playing, and you feel ultimately that you've achieved what you set out to do. And it's one of the greatest musical feelings that you can possibly get, and it's why so many of us and everyone really should be partaking into the art, because it's such a great feeling that personally myself, I don't get anywhere else. And knowing when to stop practicing, when you reach that high, to give you the most amount of motivation going to your next practice session the next day is just so great, and it's such a healthy thing to do and incorporate into your musical practice. So I strongly recommend all of you to do this. I personally do it myself, and although I've fallen down the curve a few times, and we all do, don't beat yourself up if you do that. It's easy just to keep going. Once you realize that curve and once you know what your high feels like, then you know that's your time to stop your practice session. As you practice more, you'll know how you work as a musician more, and then from that you can gauge all of this and just have the most happy, productive practice sessions, which is what we all want at the end of the day. So that's it for today's video. I hope you've enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Happy practicing.